George Friedrich Handel is basically the Baroque era's greatest immigration success story. Born in Germany, trained in Italy, he ended up so aggressively British that he makes the actual royal family look like the recent arrivals. He anglicized his own name, composed the music played at every British coronation since 1727, and was buried in Westminster Abbey with more ceremony than most genuine monarchs get. If naturalization paperwork could gloat, his would. He was born in Halle in 1685, the same year and same general patch of Germany as Johann Sebastian Bach, which suggests the local stork was putting in serious overtime that year. His father wanted a lawyer for a son, because apparently even 17th century German dads couldn't leave a musical prodigy alone to be a musical prodigy. Handel enrolled in law school, lasted about 5 minutes, and sprinted for the nearest organ bench like it owed him money. He bounced around Hamburg playing violin in opera orchestras, once fighting an actual sword duel with a fellow musician over harpsichord seating rights. Then, like any properly ambitious young composer, he went to Italy, absorbed the local style, got fawned over by cardinals, and became thoroughly, insufferably good at his craft. Eventually, he landed a job as court composer to the Elector of Hanover, a post that would be a mere footnote, except that this particular elector was about to become extremely important to English history, as in next King of England important. Handel first visited London in 1710 to premiere an opera, and much like anyone encountering actual sunshine in London for the first time, decided he could get used to this. The opera, Rinaldo, was a sensation, and he returned to Hanover with all the enthusiasm of someone dragging themselves back from vacation to a day job. Granted leave for a second London visit in 1712, he promised his employer he'd return within a reasonable time. That reasonable time turned out to be never. Handel simply stayed, ghosting his own boss on an international scale. This would be merely awkward, except that Queen Anne died in 1714, and by the rules of royal succession, the crown passed straight to the very elector Handel had abandoned, now King George I of England. Picture it. The man Handel stood up for a job now runs the entire country Handel's been freeloading in. As the story goes, Handel smoothed things over with a spectacular musical peace offering, and whatever the precise truth of it, the timing of what came next is too perfect not to enjoy. In 1717, King George I took a barge trip down the Thames, and Handel had 50 musicians floating alongside on a separate boat, playing what we now call the water music suites for hours as the royal party cruised by. The king reportedly loved it so much he had it performed 3 times over. Few things say, "Please don't hold a grudge against me," quite like producing an entire live orchestra on a river, on command. Whatever actually happened diplomatically, it worked. Handel became the unofficial house composer to the British crown for the rest of his life, churning out anthems for coronations, weddings, and any event that called for maximum trumpet. He settled into a townhouse at 25 Brook Street in Mayfair, living there for more than 30 years and writing Messiah essentially in his bedroom. That address is now a museum called Handel and Hendricks in London. Yes, that Hendricks, since Jimi Hendrix happened to live in the flat next door 2 centuries later, purely by coincidence. One building in London somehow ended up hosting both the Baroque era's biggest hit machine and the man who lit his guitar on fire at Monterey. History has a sense of humor, and Mayfair's zoning apparently allows for it. His catalog reads like a greatest hits reel for an empire. There's water music. There's music for the royal fireworks, commissioned for a display so enthusiastic that the fireworks actually caught part of the venue alight, meaning the pyrotechnics attacked the audience, and the music still came out the more memorable part of the night. There's Zadok the Priest, one of his 4 coronation anthems, which has opened every British coronation for roughly 300 years running, including King Charles III's in 2023, making Handel more continuously employed by the British monarchy than most modern civil servants. And then there's Messiah, reportedly composed in about 24 days, during which witnesses say Handel barely ate, barely slept, and possibly wept over his own manuscript. Legend holds that the Hallelujah Chorus moved King George II to rise to his feet mid-performance, and because etiquette forbids sitting while the king stands, the whole audience had to scramble upright too, a tradition we've apparently kept going ever since, out of sheer habit dressed up as reverence. Here's the amusing bit. Handel and Bach were born the same year in towns barely 50 miles apart and never once met, despite Bach trying at least twice to track him down, the Baroque equivalent of two celebrities perpetually missing each other's parties. Their lives diverged completely from there. Bach never left Germany, working church jobs, producing a fresh cantata practically every week like a man perpetually behind on homework, and fathering 20 children somewhere between compositions. Handel, by contrast, went full international celebrity. Operas, oratorios, royal commissions, no wife, no children, just an ever-growing stack of hits and a very comfortable house in Mayfair. For a century after their deaths, their reputations flipped entirely. Handel stayed famous in England without interruption, while Bach faded into obscurity outside organist circles until Mendelssohn revived him in the 1800s. One composer never left the spotlight. The other had to be dug back up. In his later years, Handel went blind, likely from cataracts, possibly worsened by a botched surgical attempt because 18th century medicine ran mostly on confidence and guesswork. He kept performing regardless, conducting oratorios entirely from memory, still turning up to his own concerts like the professional he was. There's something stubborn and admirable about a man who wrote music about triumph and resurrection while refusing to let his own failing body cancel the show. He died in 1759 and was buried in Westminster Abbey's Poets' Corner, with a state funeral attended by thousands, the kind of ceremony usually reserved for actual royalty, not a hired composer. His monument depicts him standing beside an organ, manuscript in hand, looking thoroughly pleased with himself, which honestly seems fair. He was the first foreign-born composer given that level of honor in Britain, the perfect capstone to a life that began as a German kid trained in Italy and ended with him more thoroughly British than the Hanoverian dynasty he'd once stood up for a job. Zadok the priest still opens coronations. Messiah still gets performed every December, with audiences still rising out of politeness or muscle memory for the Hallelujah Chorus. His house is a museum. His music never really slipped out of fashion, putting him in rare company among 18th century anyone. Bach may have built the more towering, quietly unappreciated architecture back in provincial German churches, but Handel wrote the party, and 300 years on, England is still playing it.